Hi, good evening. I'm Diane Taylor, Director of Public Programs here at the National Building Museum. Thank you for joining us. The museum was established by an act of Congress in 1980. We are our nation's museum for the built environment, inspiring curiosity about the world we design and build. Through programs, exhibitions, and events, we educate and engage visitors about the built environment and its impact on our lives and our communities. For more than 2 decades, the museum's signature Spotlight on Design has presented design luminaries and legends in architecture, landscape architecture, and urban planning. Spotlight on Design celebrates the creative work and unique journeys of the voices that shape and characterize our built environment. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize and thank our program sponsors, the Anthony and Keiko Greenberg Foundation, as well as KCCT, who are this year celebrating 40 years of enduring design. We're so pleased. We're so pleased to have KCCT's president and principal architect, John Chapman, here with us tonight. Public programs like this would not be possible without support and sponsorship. We thank you for making it possible to celebrate the practice of architecture and the built environment. John, please, we welcome you to share a few words.
That was a nice introduction. Our guest tonight has had a distinguished career both as an educator and as an architect. He began teaching at the University of Arkansas 32 years ago, I think, and at the same time opening his office in Fayetteville. He served as head of the architectural department at the university for, I think, 6 years, and he presently holds the Fay Jones Chair as a distinguished professor. He's the recipient of many individual project and firm awards, including 16 national AIA awards. And, something that's dear to my heart is the 2020 AIA Gold Medal. I'm not sure what it is down there in Arkansas, but they seem to produce a lot of good architects in Fayetteville. Maybe it's the water. I don't know what it is, but it is my genuine pleasure to welcome Marlon Blackwell. Thank you.
I just told John it's the chickens that we have in Arkansas. Everything tastes like chicken. So anyways, well, thank y'all, and thank you, John, and congratulations to KCCT. For 40 years, it's quite an achievement, I have to say, and you just keep going strong, so that's good too. It's great to be back. I think I had the opportunity and privilege to be here back in 2016 to talk back in different times pre-COVID, right, where you would give the talk out in the big hall, and then now we're slow. We're in this transition period, I think, right now, where we're kind of finding our ways to get together again and talk about ideas and have a dialogue with each other. And I think it's great when we are able to do this like tonight in person. So very, very appreciative of everyone being here. Also very appreciative that I have my partner with the two is Ati Blackwell, who I tell you what, we would not. This is a design partner, a business partner, and a partner in life, and I can tell you I wouldn't be here without our partnership together and without the great team that we have around us as well back in Fayetteville. I sort of very appreciative too of the National Building Museum, but also inviting me back. It's really great to be here, and it's great the mission that you have. Now, I've entitled this talk as Radical Practice, and this is a kind of part of the cover of our monograph. It's been out a couple years now. Great Princeton Architectural Press. And I was really excited about possibly having even books here for a book signing, but they're out of books, they're out of print through the second printing, and they're actually debating a third printing, which I can't hardly believe. It seems to me if we've gone through 2 printings, it might make sense that there would be a third printing. But we're discussing that right now, so I'm sorry I don't have any books. But nonetheless, a lot of folks, they think, okay, so you're in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and radical practice. And that's kind of incongruent. That doesn't make any sense. I said, well, when we talk about radical practice, we're talking not so much about the use of the term in the avant-garde way or as in revolution, but we use it from its 14th century origins as an adjective from the late Latin word radicalis, which is really meaning root, as in relating to or proceeding from roots or root. So it's really for us is about a fidelity to our roots, to the fundamentals that is necessary for us to affect change or transformation in our place or the places in which we work. And in Thoreau's words, heaven is under our feet as well as over our heads. And so it's wherever we are, we're trying to think about this idea of how we elevate place. And when we bring together disparate understandings, and forces, and observations of situation and place, we like to refer to these as abstract unions. And of course, abstract unions are found often in a place of unholy unions that encompass our approach and help us address questions of practice versus theory, of engagement versus detachment from the world, and questions of form and space. And frankly, most of our work is in a place or places where detachment simply isn't even an option, even if we wanted it to be. So for Ati and I, rather than a removal from reality, abstraction is the process of connecting to place, of generating a productive tension between the local and the global, the glocal, looking for the possibilities for using economy of means for a maximum of meaning. So as a firm of 25 based in Arkansas, we've had the unique opportunity over the 30 years we've been practicing to develop a variety of building types and different scales of buildings in our particular area, but also at the national level and even the international level. Everything from a small honey house in Cashiers, North Carolina, to a $110 a square foot public library in Gentry, Arkansas, to places like this in Rogers, Arkansas, where there's more space than form. And so we work in the wide open against the horizon. And now opportunities, I know there are members from the OBO and State Department here tonight, but opportunities to work around the world with OBO and the State Department in promoting the sort of diplomacy and values of the United States through consulates, embassies and such, and even in Central Africa, in one of the poorest countries in the world, opportunity to emplace a wonderful American embassy there. So it really is, I think, been a great ride, but really understanding that architecture can really happen just about anywhere. And from this perspective, there's first and foremost a core principle at the heart of the practice, radical in its fundamental simplicity, the association of the making of buildings and places as a constant, authentic focus. And embedded in this assertion, however, is the proposition that architecture must possess more than projective or speculative character, that architecture fundamentally requires material substance, tectonic construction, and lived experience. And that on these terms, architecture just as fundamentally is located, situated, and placed in the world. And this fundamentally underwrites a kind of deceptive notion, our deceptive notion of a radical practice, a practice that therefore is more about materials, about construction, about experience, and of a deep attentiveness to the qualities and necessities of the enrichment of the places in which it is situated. And so for us, in many ways, I'll back up on this, is place is the canvas, architecture is the medium, and it's shaped by the forces of nature and public life, in particular to local form. We like to say, this is our office, by the way, in Fayetteville, we like to say that we make work that's in the place, of the place, for the place, and sometimes slightly out of place. And that's just the kind of nature of what we do. Now, place is defined for us as a tangible representation of that intangible society that lives within it. And I like to call this placeness. So to make an architecture of placeness, I think it's necessary for us to embrace everything about a place, even the bad things, and to get below the surface to the underbelly so that we can understand these things and incorporate them in who we are and what an architecture of the place, in the place, and for the place can be. And so often this is a story of transformation. When you come into our office, you're always confronted with this bear. And it kind of relates back to a story I had that where I actually had to wrestle a live bear as part of being on a wrestling team in Colorado at 105 pounds. Now, I won't go into the story. I don't have time, wrestling a 400-pound bear. But for our folks that come in, you always must be prepared to take on the bear, this existential kind of notion of, taking on the big challenges and embracing them, with conditional optimism, let's say. So this idea of transformation, it happens almost in every project we do. There's always a story that goes with it. We bought this building, this mercantile building from the 30s, and basically redid the entire thing for $69 a square foot. So we had to figure out how we could use paint to kind of redo the outside. So we hired this guy to basically paint the building in stripes, one stripe at a time, all by hand. It took him 4 months to do it. When he finished, I said, "Man, this looks great." He goes, "Yep." He goes, "And next time I'll call you, don't call me." So, but it all kind of goes into this idea that every opportunity we have is a transformation story. So I'm reminded of a story that took place in Fayetteville, Arkansas, post-war. This was with a family by the name of Fulbright. Maybe you heard of William J. Fulbright, the senator, and Fulbright scholarships. And his family owned a mill, and they had used local white oak to make farm implements, plowshares, axe handles, wagon wheels, all sorts of things. And they were building up an inventory because post-war the demand had dropped. So he decided to go to see a friend of his who was at that time a childhood friend from Fayetteville, an international known architect who was building the first fine arts complex on an American university campus at that time. And his name was Edward Durrell Stone. And so he went to Mr. Stone. He said, "Ed," said, "you're a creative individual. I've got all of these farm implements. I don't know what to do with them, and we're continuing to build up an inventory. What ideas do you have?" He goes, "Well, let me think about it." So he came back to him in about 2 weeks, and he says, "Here's my thought. Why don't we modify all of these tools and such and instruments into an international line of furniture that you can start a new business with and generate revenue, and we can use it to populate our new fine arts complex." So wagon wheels became stools, plow handles became these beautiful chairs, big plowshares, along with the traditional craft of Ozark basket making, became beautiful chase lounges. So immediately had an impact on they have a new business as well as the population in the new fine arts complex. Now it had a local impact, but if you go to say a place like the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum, you'll see these very same pieces of furniture there today. So it signifies the sort of global significance it has too. And that's really, in a lot of ways, what we're after in what we do, to understand that the new develops out of the old, but the old, however, is changed in the light of the new. And so we're always mindful that there are patterns that connect, that there are intersections between what is nature-made and what is culture-made, and we're often seeking that for our own inspirations. And recognizing that most of what we do operates between the ideal and the discipline and the more improvised. And we don't see one as a plus or one as a minus. We actually see them as both sources of great inspiration, and that our task is to basically create resonance between these two conditions through the things we make. and understanding that the everyday provides some really great sources of inspiration. And basically, we like to kind of take the world as it's given to us, let's say, and then represent it on our own terms. And so through situations of new siting or programming, new typologies, a way to think about it, we go through processes of transformation where we arrive at the strangely familiar, that productive tension between the local and the more universal. And just another small tidbit before we dive into projects is just that before I became an architect, I was a cartoonist. And I still kind of think in that same way. I think about the fugitive nature of the silhouette, the reductive ways in which profile is made, or where expressive character can come from in an economy of marks. And so most all the work you'll see is designed with that in mind, along with the idea of section as being the predominant way in which we kind of imagine buildings. Always remember that plans are important, but sections for us are the spatial generators of a project. So the project that really I think encapsulates so much of what I've just talked about is a small little church, an Eastern Orthodox church in Springdale, Arkansas, St. Nicholas. And this really started by a small congregation that was worshiping in a downtown, rundown office building in Springdale, Arkansas. And you can see they have a very aestheticized form of worship with their icons and the rituals and such, colors, symbols. And this, for them, was a very kind of undignified place in which to work. And they really wanted their own sanctuary, their own fellowship hall. They had one of the members of their church died and left them some money. And so they went out on the interstate and bought about 3.5 acres of land. And with the money they had left over, they wanted to build this church. So they brought us out there on the site, and it came with a house and with this welding shed. And it said, you know, we'd like to keep the house for the priest, for Father John. So could you turn this into a new sanctuary and fellowship hall? And I was like, well, you mean like tear it down and then build on the footprint? And they're like, no, we only have $100 a square foot. So can you turn this welding shed into a church? And it's like, you know, your heart just sinks. It's like, oh my God. And okay, we thought about it. And then, you know, we said, okay, well, let's go back to origins. You know, the whole origins of the Orthodox Church and the Greek Orthodox Church. And we began to look at proportioning systems. And because we thought, you know, what doesn't cost anything that architects can do? Well, proportion and scale doesn't cost anything, really, if you think about it. It's one of the great skills that we have. And so using these Greek proportioning systems, we reconfigured this small building into this new abstract figure. Has all the symbols, the colors. We mixed in a little bit of Corbusier with the canopy because I believe everything goes better with a little bit of Corb. And then we clad it in this box rib metal system off the rack, but then basically customized all the transition details. And I'll explain that here in just a minute. How did we do this? Well, the existing metal building is still there. We just wrapped it in a new metal skin. We added 10 foot to the front of it to create a narthex, which you can move north-south to get on the east-west axes into the sanctuary. Some movable walls that allow for overspill during certain times of the year. And then, of course, you have your fellowship hall there as well. And then those transition details allow for a seamlessness in the way the cladding works. This abstraction comes forth. And then we coursed everything, the windows, the downspouts, the exit doors. Everything is coursed. So we're elevating this ordinary system through the craft of just precise thinking and precise execution. And on the inside, we cut one window through the existing building from the east to get morning light in. The iconostasis is all angle iron that we could, and just, basically chairs that they were able to get donated. So very simple, and simple proportioning system on the inside as well. The one thing they really needed, though, was a dome. And they wanted a dome on the outside of the church, on the roof, but we couldn't do it because of the pre-engineered structure. So they allowed it to be put in the plenum. But they couldn't afford the fiberglass dome that we had spec'd. And the contractor we had, even though he's a member of the church and everything, said, I don't know that I could make one that would meet your expectations. So I was like, well, what are we going to do? And he goes, because I said, we're in the middle of construction here. He said, well, I have a friend of mine who, an old metal worker that lives out in the mountains about 20 miles away. He loves beer. And he said if we gave him a couple cases of beer, he'd give us this satellite dish. So that's exactly what we did. So we took the satellite dish and then skim coated it in plaster, because it's its own natural lath, of course, jacked it up on a scissor lift, and they have their dome. And that's how we roll in Arkansas. So, and I told Father John, I said, man, you've got a direct connection to God now. And he goes, yeah, but it's pointed in the wrong direction. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's true. I had another fellow on the building committee said, and I know where we can get a bishop's throne, a chair, when he comes to bless the place. It's all out of walnut, and it's got crushed purple velvet upholstery, and I can get it for free. And I said, really? Where? And he goes, well, it's part of an ad campaign at a local liquor store. And they said, when it's over, I get the chair. And I said, okay. He goes, I'm just concerned because I don't know what I'm going to do about the embroidered CR on the chair. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he goes, well, Crown Royal. And Father John overheard us and walked over and said, no, Christ the Redeemer, get the chair. So that's how. So in 2013, we got a wonderful call from the National AIA, Institute Honor Award program, to say that this had won an Institute Honor Award. And so we were very intrigued by the budget for this building at $100 a square foot. And we went back and did research, and we've discovered that this is the least expensive building to ever win a National Institute Honor Award. And so it really underscores what Ati and I have been trying to do for the last 30 years, is to demonstrate that architecture can happen anywhere, at any scale, at any budget, and for anyone. It's not just reserved for the few. Everyone deserves architecture, and everything can be architecture. And this church is still going strong today. So this was just a few weeks ago at Orthodox Easter with the processions, and just it's a growing, and now we're having to think about expansion. So when thinking about ideas of transformation, we've thought about transformation of tools, transformation of an existing building. There's also transformations at the scale of an existing landscape as well. And this is the largest urban park in America, Shelby Farms, which is located in Memphis, Tennessee, on the east side of Memphis. And it's a beautiful park, a nonprofit with a variety of different programs. We were working with James Corner, Field Operations. They had been working on it a few years when we were brought in to develop a series of new buildings and programs to activate this new enlarged lake in the heart of the park. Now, this park used to be a prison farm. And basically from the 20s until the 70s, prisoners worked this land, developed crops to feed themselves as well as cattle. And then what was left over, they sold off to the county. And so when that was no longer an acceptable form of rehabilitation, then that property became turned back over to the county, which had a very difficult time managing this. And so they were talking to speculators to come in and maybe do, rows and rows of suburban type housing. And the folks that lived around there said, no, this is a great natural asset that we have in the city, and we need a park on this side of the city, on the east side. And so they formed a 501c, and it became Shelby Farms Park. Now the problem with the park is that while it was a park, it never had a true identity. It was not as welcoming. It did not reflect the socioeconomic and racial diversity of Memphis, and nor did it particularly stay, in the black, right? It was not particularly, there's nonprofit and then there's no profit. And so that was a problem as well. So the idea was to enlarge this heart of the park, the 200 acres, add a series of programs, an ensemble of programs like a visitor center, a stage pavilion, an event center and restaurant, different shade pavilions for picnics, boat kiosk, a whole variety of things, and then activities that go with that. One of the things that we did notice, though, every time we were out on the site is that wherever there was shade, there was people. No shade, no people, just common sense. And so we realized that every building would have to create its own shade because it's out in an old existing pasture. and would allow for the 1 million trees that JCFO had planted throughout the park to take root and to take hold over time. You never just produce a landscape, it's achieved over time. So we looked, again, back to origins, back to the vernacular, things like porches and breezeways and ways that we could connect to the history of the place in many ways, but still look forward. And so the visitor center is an 8,000 square foot visitor center with an 8,000 square foot porch. And we use a really simple palette of materials. We're taking aluminum bar grate, the kind that you walk on, and we've turned it into a cladding system. We figured out how to develop a substructure to the superstructure that would allow for this very ephemeral sort of skin, along with third growth cypress, renewable material there, and then some zinc-like metal panels that we could get. We're using breezeways here that are extended thresholds into the landscape. And then you come out underneath this 32-foot cantilevered porch, and these uninterrupted views of the landscape. And then this becomes another kind of program space where they have yoga here and receptions and all sorts of activities, and another revenue stream. And of course, you're in Memphis, it's hot. If you're in the shade, you're still gonna sweat. So we decided to ventilate the shade with 5 20-foot big-ass fans. That's a trademark. And that keeps the cooling effect going. And man, it's just used like practically year-round, and you can see, and it's always turning colors because of the way the different morning and evening and midday light works on this. So it's really quite dynamic, and I love the way too that the JCFO kind of really configured the land to kind of work with each of the buildings as the way they sort of situate them and create resonance there. The picnic pavilions, we like to call them the crickets. They are great shade pavilions, but they're really what they're used a lot for is family reunions. They're booked out months in advance. They're kind of littered around the park. The boat kiosk, again, with its own porch. You've got all of the canoes and paddle boards, kayaks, along with concession stand. All of that's part of the water play area. And then the event lawn here with its stage pavilion, but it's also a stage pavilion for events that happen on the lake, the boat races and such. And when it's not being used, it also makes a great shade pavilion, a place of gathering. And all of these, like I say, are just a family of figures that are related throughout the landscape. And then the restaurant and event center, big conference center with farm-to-table restaurant, has a beautiful interface with the edge of the lake here. It's quite nice. And then this really deep porch, 80-foot deep porch, where there's more seating outside than inside. And then, of course, sets up for this facing west, these beautiful evening sunset dining opportunities. But you can see the park is alive at night too. So it's alive during the day and the evening. It has a presence. And it's been a huge success since it opened in 2016. Its attendance has increased almost by 100%. It's the social, economic, racial diversity has increased dramatically for the park, and it's been in profit, making profit ever since it opened. So it just underscores the transformational possibilities for architecture, if not to totally change institutions, certainly to strengthen them in this idea of making a place that people truly want to be in and feel welcome to. So in that spirit, we just finished a project a few years ago in Detroit, Michigan, working with the Kresge Foundation. And this is the Mary Grove Early Childhood Education Center on the former Mary Grove College. So it's located in the McNichols-Livermore neighborhood in 6 Mile in Detroit, traditional African-American neighborhood that had Mary Grove College, a liberal arts college there. It was a big part of the community. And like a lot of Detroit, it had began to, its, I would say, enrollment diminished through a kind of attrition. They got into some financial difficulty and basically had to close their undergraduate and then eventually their graduate programs. And so rather than letting the campus fall into disuse and eventually disrepair, the Kresge Foundation stepped in and said, we want to repurpose this campus into a cradle-to-career campus. So from the time you're born as an infant all the way to you're 20 years old, you can go to school here. And so they wanted to repurpose this as a place for 1,000 students, part of this neighborhood. And the cornerstone of this was an early childhood learning center from all the way from prenatal up to kindergarten. And it's a one-story building, a mat building, located right on the south edge of campus here. You can see the historic collegiate Gothic buildings that exist, and then these more mid-century modern brick buildings on the other side. And so we came up with a simple idea in this sort of mat footprint is to carve a series of courtyards in it to bring light into the middle, to create places for play and learning, and controlled areas, as well as ways to increase the wayfinding and organize the interior. And you kind of get a sense of the neighborhood here, all these sort of single-family homes with, the main road and then the access from the south, or I should say from the north, from the neighborhood. And it's a building that we did not get to do the community engagement with. That was a third party because they wanted folks that had the trust of the neighborhood. But we were allowed in to hear the aspirations, to read the tea leaves of what folks were wanting for that. And they truly wanted to be part of this campus, to have resonance with it, but they wanted their own identity. This building they saw as a type of community center, a gathering place. And one of the things that they came back with is that we don't want a monochromatic building. We don't want a brick building. We want it all clad in metal, all these things. And we're working very closely with Wendy L. Jackson, who's the vice director of Kresge. And she goes, we want polychroma. Our culture is about polychroma. We want something that speaks to inclusion and diversity and how we think here. And which is terrifying to an architect if you think about it. We have lots of color on the inside, but putting it out on the outside is like turning your pants inside out or something. It was very scary. But we got to talking and we realized that we had shared roots in the South. And I said, this really sounds like a coat of many colors you want to clad this in. And so he said, yeah, it's like a quilt. And I said, yeah, this patchwork. And then we got to talking about, a group of ladies in Alabama, Gee's Bend, who are known for their quilts. And they take the old discarded rags and then stitch them together into these beautiful compositions and beautiful articles of use as well, which you can now find in the Museum of Modern Art. And I used to go there because I go to the Rural Studio quite a bit in Alabama. So I knew the Petway family to some degree. So, just went back and kind of revisited them and just kind of trying to soak up the way in which they approach color and trying to figure out how to do this in the most sort of economical way. And so we went through 150 different palette studies. The material we're using is glazed terracotta panels because they wanted something as resilient as the limestone of those existing buildings, that it had to be, really durable over 50 to 100 years, even more. And so we came up with, of course, the base colors and shades, but then the accents. Each color costs money, so we had to be very careful how we use it. But this is the one that seemed most acceptable, and you can see it resonates quite well with the kids as well. And then elements for us are spatial proposition, windows, doors, columns. So we start to grab light from the side, from above, from the front, as a way to articulate and animate the facades, both as kind of extrusions, but then also gentle subtractions as the walls lean in to welcome you into the building. And the first thing you see, of course, is the first courtyard. This is the lobby. On your left is a coffee shop for the families. On the right, community rooms where community groups gather, especially in the evenings. So you can drop your child off and you don't have to leave. You can hang out, have coffee, visit with your friends, and that sort of thing. And of course, the classrooms are all, understood as, places of learning and play, but so are the hallways and so forth. There's places to gather there. We're always looking for opportunities here. We're carving out of one of those places to make a reading room area. So every space is considered a type of classroom, and every classroom has direct connection to a courtyard or to nature outside. So again, that learning lesson can go to the outside and you can use nature's examples. It's also a great place for play. And we also have these for the staff as well. So they have their break room area, but also their courtyard. So places for solitude as well as fellowship. And you can begin to see in these sections I'm showing you, we're really working the section to create different scales and different proportions so that you get out of the systemization of education, right, where everything is absolutely the same and kind of monotonous, and we're looking for dissimilarity and variety and choice in the spaces. And these are the community rooms here, and they're all kind of lit from above, places to gather as well. So, and I'll show you a little bit more about this pitch and roll idea that we have when I'll show you another school. The courtyards spill out into this beautiful grove trees where our landscape architect here, Margie Ruddick, has done a beautiful job of weaving in these play and learning scapes amongst the grove of trees. And what's great about this too is that this is what the neighbors see when they come to bring their kids, when they walk their kids. So there's the driving approach, but this is from walking. Neighborhoods is very welcoming as well. And had the great opportunity to go back a few years ago when it just opened. I have to say the operative word would be joy. The families, the kids, the staff, the teachers. It was just really an amazing experience to see how well this worked for them. But I also went back to Gee's Bend in Alabama. I was on a trip with my family, and we stopped in, and I saw Miss Petway there, and I was just looking at some quilts that she had, and I said, oh, by the way, and I pulled up my phone, I said, that building I talked about a few years ago, we're done. I said, what do you think? She looked at it, and she's showing this image, and she's like, well, you've just given me an idea for a quilt. So kind of all circles back sometimes. So I'm going to shift places, and I'm going to shift scale with you because we've done a lot. There we have a kind of sweet spot, and you're sort of seeing it where we're working at. But we had most recently, right before the pandemic, a really great opportunity, which is to develop a project about health, a whole health institute, which is about preventative health and about investigating and questioning the existing healthcare system we have in this country on how to deal less, about being sick and more about what it is to be well, life management, well-being, and so forth. And this is a national institute that's envisioned and funded by Alice Walton, and it's on the campus of the Crystal Bridges Museum in Bentonville. And it also has as part of it another institute called Art Bridges, which is about getting basically artwork out of the basements of museums and into communities. And so really two great missions located in one building. Now, the great thing about the part of Arkansas we live in is we are 60% forested state, and we have great forests, and we have a karst topography, or karst geology, I should say, of limestone here. So that, this idea of the cave and the forest is a big part of who we are as a culture in the Ozarks. But Northwest Arkansas has never had great soils. That's why we never had a big agricultural base. That's why we have a lot of chickens. Beef, used to have some apples, but then a blight, if you ever had Arkansas black apples or whatever, or great baking apples. But we have soils really thin because our cash crop is rocks. I mean, that's the reality is it's hard to grow things. So anyways, I'll pause on that. So just take you to the campus. So what you're looking at here, bridging over the stream, is the Crystal Bridges Museum designed by Moshe Softy. The two red figures are the whole health on the left, and then a 800-car parking garage because we were building this whole health at the edge of a ravine and in the old surface parking area for the museum. And then they're building a medical college to the north there by Polk Stanley. So it's a lot of different activities and things going on. This is the museum, a kind of collection of geometric and platonic shaped forms, again, kind of connected together over the stream. Now, most folks, in the Ozarks, 50, 60 years ago, 100 years ago, it's a pretty hard scrabble place. And so if they wanted to make architecture, they certainly didn't hire an architect. They would just take whatever they had and make it. So a lot of fieldstone became giraffe stone, what we call giraffe buildings. And that's how they made facades. So one of the things we wanted to do is make a connection back to this place through the material culture that we had. And so one of the materials, we're trying to keep it to two materials, is to take this local stone and begin to abstract it in our own ways and kind of experiment with the different ways that you make the grout joints. And then think of this as more of the cave and then the forest as really this kind of highly filigreed brise-soleil on the north and south side of this curved volume with all the offices and consultation rooms and such are above. But rather than use wood, we're using pre-weathered brass for its durability. So we have the cave and the forest working together here. And it wraps itself. The curves really come away around gestures around the ravine to create this great event lawn and begin to peel apart to create another extended threshold into the campus as an extension of these pathway journeys that kind of really articulate the entire campus of Crystal Bridges. Here you can get a little sense of how that begins to work with the brise-soleil system and these spaces along the edge of the forest. And a section through that kind of gives you an idea of how the ravines, that interface happens between the different figures. And then there's, of course, a series of porches through this extension of the body up above the forest, and the community porch, 2-story, but lots of low-slung places for community and gathering or improvisational, or something more directed and intended. So the material strategies really came from looking at trees and the kind of striated rhythms of the bark, these white oaks and such, and then translating that to the fins themselves, the solar fins, and then beveling the edges of those to catch light and shadow. So there's a kind of dynamic quality, and trying to imbue this architecture with what something Wright would talk about as architecture imbued with the order of change. And so it's a constant state of change as the light, the sun moves around it. We're doing full-scale mock-ups here to test the different types of rock and the joints and the way in which we articulate and make the transitional details for the cladding system. And it's currently under construction, so it should be done by the end of the year, but you can see now they're starting to install these fins. You can begin to see the light and shadow flickering off the edge of the panels here, and this is kind of where we'll arrive at eventually with that, and you can begin to see how that's coming together here as well. So trying to get this resonance between the stone and the metal, and of course they're kind of really cut down on any kind of solar gain you might get. Now, typically with these giraffe stone buildings, they're not that tall or big. This is a 19-foot high wall that acting as the base for the building. And we're using rope joints. So these are extruded joints that create shadow play on the stone as well, and really kind of activate that surface. And in the way in which we light it at night, we'll also be doing something similar. So we're always thinking about the presence of the building in the day and its interaction with nature, and then how we can create another interaction in the evenings. And you can begin to see how these are working together, the stone and the curved bodies up above, to create these low-slung porches as well, and breezeways. And it's really, like I say, starting to come together. Here you see the fins going up and the curvature of this, the arrival by car. But just to give you an idea of how these things are starting to go. So you're really starting to see the local and the more universal come together. And as you come indoors, the entire idea of the forest is carried forward by local pecan, which is a 3NC robot milled plywood ribs that kind of articulate and act as a datum for every ceiling on every floor here. And then this grand public stair, cafe, stone floors, and then plaster walls. And you can begin to see how that's coming together again with the light that sort of pours through. They're just starting on the ceiling just now. And upstairs is a lot of different types of open office, and then a series of kind of oblong conference rooms and such that are intersected in these in the open office area as well. But beautiful, simple, organic forms. And so there are hardly any 90-degree corners in the entire building. It's all about this flow and this sort of organic movement through. We do have places too for yoga, exercise, and meditation. So this is, we haven't come up with a name for it. I call it the cone, but there's the anti-space here to kind of prepare, decompress, to come in, and then this 30-foot tall cone that bends to the north to bring in light in an almost mysterious way. And you can see that in this section here. And Ati and I were sort of delighting in the way that the contractors were figuring out how to build this cone. So you can see it. It looks like a big badminton thing, but it will all be coated in plaster on the inside. And so this is just taken last week or the last few weeks. So you see they're sort of wrapping it with the substrate, and then they'll come back with the plaster. It'll be all white. And that light will just kind of very gently pour into this sort of kind of heavenly piece. So different aspects, both public and again, more for solitude as well. And then we're also in placing art. So this really is an intersection of art, nature, architecture, and health. So we're embedding art in the building, in vitrines, so they become part of the pathway journeys. So the building is both also an exhibit. And here you can see it as of just about a week ago. So it's all starting to come together. Now, its companion building is, we like to call Art Park, although now it's called Campus Parking and Sky Terrace, which is less fun. But anyways, Art Park, we were just asked to do an 800-car parking garage. And we came up with an idea, we said, well, this is right on the edge of a plaza as part of a playscape called Convergence. And I think we were thinking, well, let's propose to the owner how we could expand that program. And so the idea was to create a proscenium for art, 150 feet long by 4 stories high, where performances would happen and sculpture could be displayed and people come through from the cars down through into this grand proscenium and then into the porch underneath that has a bar and a retail shop. And you begin to see how that interface works with the proscenium and the bar and the plaza on down into the playscape of the ravine. And so this rendering kind of gives you a little idea of what we were after here. And then this is it today. And so now they've started to infill with all kinds of places to lounge and hang out with art, and then they'll move that around. They'll have a music performance. And so really trying to cross-program so that it's always something here, 1 + 1 = 5, rather than just 2. And that's the kind of idea. And then the plaza is starting to come together now with that interface. And Ati's designed a really beautiful bar here on the inside, all using local woods, but nice big porch. We had tornadoes hit this weekend you might have read about. Of course, the first thing we did, we jumped in the car, Ati and I ran up and checked on all our clients and all our buildings. Pray God. And luckily nothing happened, but these are composite chairs, so they are so heavy they didn't hardly move, which is good, because had they been, become projectiles, they would have destroyed the bar in a heartbeat. Now, the color you keep seeing is like, well, why would you do that with a building? Well, we're really into trying to find very specific types of identity for buildings in inexpensive ways. If you do a lot of metal, they'll customize any color for you. So we've been using automotive body paint. This is my grandmother's 65 Pontiac Tempest, Agua Azur. And we thought, well, why don't we just paint this whole building Agua Azur, kind of work with the sky, threw it out there with the clients. I love it. Okay, so that's it. It was so simple. But this is, and then we use a metal flake, either silver or gold, to really animate the depth in the reading. So it also is very, has a lot of, how do you say, dynamism, let's say, in the surface. And this is the east elevation. And then we use jelly jar lights, so we get this kind of firefly effect through our lighting designer here. So it comes here, and then it comes on at night and starts to really dance. And the lights go on and off, and they do all kinds of different phase lighting here. Here you can say during the day, and then at night has its own kind of presence again. So it's just, we're starting a soft opening next week for this, but kind of exciting too that it can play a role in the active programming of the museum campus itself. So you haven't seen any real urban buildings. I'm going to show you one that's under construction. It's in Boston. It's called the Enterprise Research Campus. It's across from the Harvard Business School. It's located within Alston Landing. So the Enterprise Research Campus basically revitalizes a former industrial rail yard into a green, pedestrian-friendly hub for creativity, exploration, and research. And the campus contains a conference center, research labs by Gang Studio, and then a research lab by Henning Larsen, as well as Housing, which includes 25% affordable housing, which is the largest ratio of affordable housing in Boston right now for a new project. And that's being done by MVRDV. And then there's a greenway by Scape, Landscape Architects, that sort of ties the neighborhood through this development to the Charles River and creates a great public way there as well. And this is, I think, a really great kind of ensemble of buildings. And of course, anchoring the northwest corner is the ERC Hotel, which is a 240-room lifestyle hotel that we have had the privilege of doing. We're doing the core and shell. I wish we were doing the interiors. I'll leave it at that. It's a 16-story mixed-use tower, and the ground floor features restaurants, local retail, and cafes that outline the edge of the campus and then frame the entrance also to the Greenway. So that's kind of its relationship to the Charles River. It sits right across the street from the Harvard Business School. You can see outlined in red. Here is our project that shares a podium with the housing, and then to your right is the Gang Conference Center and then the labs back to the south. So our approach to this was, we were given this master plan massing that Gang Studio had already done, and we'd given the sort of table and tower scheme, which we immediately questioned as this faces north and is this sort of great interface with Western Ave, and we thought it could be, it really needed to be one thing rather than two things. So we wanted to establish frontality, so we've got an alignment between the vertical and the horizontal elements, and then activating the ground floor, so we began to allow it to hit the earth very lightly, and then shape the building to the skyline in context, so really allow it to kind of reach out towards particular views of the city line, and then cityscape, skyline, and then enhance the streets through landscaping and different porches and so forth that the building could create. So this ensemble of buildings, this what we called a still life, the campus, we wanted to be the portrait in that still life. And then these are some of the different views that one gets from back, towards the Alston, the town, back towards the campus, and then about towards the skyline of Boston. So it's a very simple figure on its base, and then has a series of terraces, both at the 6th story and at the 16th, as well as a bar and such, but just very simple. And then we take the whole north side, and that becomes a sort of transparent glass where you see the life of the hotel and all the different activity that'll happen with each individual room doing its own thing with its colored curtains and shades and that sort of thing. And then it's wrapped on three sides by this very nice, lustrous, sort of scalloped metal cladding system that sets up the north side. And then you can begin to see how the ground floor is articulated in the hotel main entrance. And then these porches as well that happen on either end, and then the way Scape has landscaped those. So there's kind of a lot going on to activate public life, and then that's distributed up through the building with the public terraces and on the different floors. And it's currently under construction, where these are some of the different full-scale mock-ups on the different buildings. And ours here on the right. And then the building here, how it should look when it's all said and done. Again, this simple abstract figure that creates this portrait or interface with Western Ave. And then at night becomes its own type of hypersurface, so to speak, to the north. Anyway, so this should be done end of next year, so we're kind of excited. I was hoping to get some updated photos. The figure now is being masked out. It would have been kind of cool, but I don't know, people are sleeping on the job or something. I couldn't get any response today, so. But a lot of the things that I've showed you are kind of rather, the material systems and the systems themselves are rather ordinary. There's a lot of boxes, and then we like to think we're the SciArc of dumb boxes in the office. We're not worried about trying to pull a lot of gymnastics. But I met a really nice client when I was working in Detroit, a nice fellow, I should say, that became a client, named Philip Kafka. And he'd been doing some really interesting development in Detroit using a very ordinary system of building, a Quonset hut system. And grew up in Dallas, Fort Worth, and so he invited us to come in and, could you take this system and we do a mixed-use development in an emerging neighborhood in Fort Worth, Magnolia Village. And it would be housing, it would be offices, it would be a restaurant, a bookshop, public plaza, all of that. And I said, I'm not worried about filling up every aspect of the site because it's not New York, right? I can kind of relax a little bit and really make this a great public-private interface. So this is the project here. It's called PS 1200, PS standing for public space in Magnolia Village. And just a very simple organization of the Quonset system, but then we put a little bit of twist to some of that too. Now, in Fort Worth, the site is only located about a mile and a half from a very famous museum you might know of. And we thought, well, here's an opportunity to ennoble the prosaic, to really elevate this simple system. And, we can riff off of this museum, but, really for us, it's really about this prosaic. Only to discover in our research that Kahn was looking at the stockyards of Fort Worth in his own inspiration, so he beat us to it. Oh, well, he's done that a lot. But our spirit, I think, and hearts are in the right places. And so it's all prefabricated, so once you get the bases built, each of these go up in about a day and a half in the metal panel system. And then, of course, it's insulated and skinned on the inside. And you don't really punch the shell much because it compromises the structure. You just infill on the ends. This is what you get. But the trick was, okay, that's the vertical, but and these are 20-foot wide, so they're wide enough for a living unit and for the offices below. But how do you deal with the one-story buildings? Kind of hard to do to make a restaurant and to really get it linear. So what we decided to do was turn this corrugated system on the side and turn it into a cladding system, so from structure to cladding. And it created some great opportunities for how we develop and articulate the street edge, but also how we develop elements and how we can develop our own eccentricities or elements that are very particular to the system. So here we're extending it, making this beautiful window to the street where you can actually see the chef and his team working in the kitchen of this restaurant here. Then you see the kind of carrels in the plaster. Those are seating carrels on the inside. A public plaza made out of recycled stone and pond cypress and cypress by Julie Bargman of Dirt. Amazing project. And she really, most landscape architects will use cypresses and cedars and stuff as really edges or walls. Julie uses them like jazz notes to make space. And she's really thinking of this as a type of forest that will grow up. And this will kind of, in her words, that this will be like the machines in the forest over time. And again, it also created some opportunities for how we create, cuts and subtractions and articulation, openings, windows and such. And really how you develop specific details. So you're hybridizing a system, the jambs and the sills, and the different ways in which you kind of stop the corrugation to open the buildings up. And then along the alleyway, you get the porches for the units up above and then the shading for the office below. And, we even shape the trees to kind of work it too, Quonset trees. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know who did the tree, but it kind of all goes together. It does quite well. And then the inside's very simple, just a simple barrel vault. And then the middle is a maple plywood service core, really, for your bathroom, bedroom, kitchen, mechanical, and that's it. And then everything else is just space. And they're really quite lovely units. And you're embedded right there in the city, so you really feel like I'm part of the city. The interstitial spaces are also activated as well as public space. And the neighborhood's really starting to embrace it with new small businesses opening up, like this barbershop just opened up, and really becoming really enmeshed in the community. And it's been a great success. We got our rear window moment where we got everybody to raise their shades. And so we may never ever see this again, but really, really exciting place. And just another way to think about development and think about that interface between the public and the private. And that it isn't always about solving all the urban issues in the facade, right? And in the massing, but like a big block. So it's a different strategy. Which leads to another kind of thought about urban interplace, about how you can build at a scale that in some ways is a manifestation of the local culture. And so if you come to Bentonville, Arkansas, you'll know that it's one of the #1 top, mountain bike places in the country, if not the top. Biking is a big part of the culture. So we were asked to do a 200,000 square foot office building, 4 blocks from the downtown square. This was going to be WeWork's first ground up building, a ground up co-office working building. And we were working with their architecture department headed by Michel Rochkin, a very noted Mexican architect, as well as his team, including Christian Callahan, Aruka Rucci, James Slade, Adrian Howe, and others. And so this would be the first bikeable building, we believe, in the country, maybe the world. So we thought, why couldn't we just make a building where you could redistribute public space, you take it right up the side of the building, you can just ride your bike to your 6th floor office, and you have a series of public terraces along the way. And so they become extensions of the programming of the building itself. And so this is the Ledger building here. And a very simple diagram, and it's all about mobility, again, and this idea of well-being, and this kind of interface between the exterior and the interior. There also comes with its own parking garage, which really acts as a backdrop to great public art. Worked with Stefan Sagmeister there out of New York, and Ned Kahn. But you get the sense here of this moving, and then out on the north-south ends are these great public terraces and ledges.